not just in 3 days as the de facto nominee, but in months now on the campaign trail, has focused on a rather singular message: we're not going back. And her crowds are already chanting that.
Yeah, and there's a direct line, Nicole, from the DE&I attack to Project 2025, this blueprint that says very explicitly that it wants to go after all the protections we created in civil rights laws through the civil rights movement, through the 60 years, sitting here on the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. When you hear them say she's a DE&I fill in the blank, in addition to its overt racism and sexism, I don't say it out loud, it is overtly sexist and racist to say that by virtue of the fact that she's a woman and a woman of color, she's not qualified, because that's all they're saying, is exactly the same thing that they've put in the blueprint as the plan for the country, to say we will undermine the ability of the federal government to assert, enforce, and protect us from employment discrimination, that we will try to close and shutter the Department of Education if we can, but if we can't, we'll just make sure any of the complaints of our children, whether they're being bullied because they're Jewish, by the way, or because they're Muslim, or because they're Black or Asian or anything else, we're going to take the power of them to force our civil rights laws away to protect our children in schools. That is what was in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This messaging is explicit in that project, and what Kamala Harris is doing, both as a vice president, because I've been with her when she has made these statements as a vice president as a matter of policy, and what she's explaining to the American public is we have a choice for the future, and it's either to be in the future or it's to go back to the dark ages. And I think she's making it plain and clear.
I mean, the only fight that's sort of underway is on the right? You got Kevin McCarthy and Adam Kinzinger, two Republicans, scolding Republicans, voices on the right, making this attack. Not only, I would guess, because it's immoral, but because it stinks as a political line of attack.
Yeah, I don't think they can do it, though. The toothpaste is out of that tube.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire MAGA movement is predicated on this not even dog whistle, on this grievance, on this sense of hatred, the sense of the demographic shifts in the country, that the browning of America, the idea that big government has put its thumb on the scale such that these folk can jump ahead of the line, the very ways in which merit is being deployed in order to, shall we say that someone like me shouldn't be at Princeton, for example, because it's precisely because of affirmative action. So all of that has been at the heart of MAGA since he came down the escalator. So the idea that somehow we're going to go back to the 90s and the 80s and do dog whistles, foghorns, that's all they do is foghorns.
I don't know how to say this carefully, and I'd like to say it carefully, but Donald Trump is someone so supremely unqualified. Republican Senator Bob Corker described the West Wing as daycare. His generals took him to a tank to explain. I think they had maps and diagrams and crayons involved. General Kelly, his chief of staff, described him as, quote, the most damaged human being he ever met. And he picked a guy to be his running mate who was his son's pal, who's been in the Senate for 15 minutes. This seems like a bizarre line of attack. Qualifications?
Well, it honestly doesn't seem bizarre to me. It seems to be bizarre to me if we're having this conversation among us, for the